What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're doing a reaction to a React video. Now I know that sounds pretty silly, but I recently watched the Rhykker reacts video to the Fall of Diablo 4 video that's currently kind of popping off on YouTube, and I really enjoyed the video. So I felt like I really wanted to kind of add my own little 2 cents in here. It's the internet, it's YouTube, everybody's got an opinion. I have one, I might as well go ahead and share mine. But with that being said, I did want to say 2 things. So we are getting very close to 100 subscribers. I think I'm currently sitting at 81 as I make this video. And, if you guys watch this video and you think I earned it, please go ahead, hit that subscribe button, guys, because our big goal of 100 subs is coming up, and it's we're getting there pretty fast, so I'm pretty excited. And number 2, if by some chance you happened upon this video before you watched the original Rhykkers Reacts video, get out of here, bro. I'm going to put the link to the video in the description. Go watch that video in its entirety. It's a phenomenal video. And if you feel like you have time after that, come back to this one and see what I have to say. But yeah, definitely go watch that man's video. He's a phenomenal content creator, big inspiration for me. And it's a great video to watch. So with that being said, if you are still here or you found your way back, without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into the video. And as you can see here, I've got it pulled up about halfway through the video because most of the first half was really just a brief history of all the Diablo games in terms of where Blizzard was at. And I think Rhykker did a great job at kind of offering a different perspective on the overall points made in the video. And I figured, let's get right past all that stuff and get to Diablo 4 because that's the game I'm playing. That's what I want to focus on. And the first thing they focus on here is the Druid class, one of the big deals about the Druid class. So I main a Druid. I love the Druid class. So I figured let's go ahead and start right here.
Little did they
how could it? It's not the same people.
know, it only got much worse moving forward. The open beta weekend arrived, allowing everybody openly to play the game, and all 5 classes up to level 25. Immediately, players are noticing the difference in power between the Druid and the Necromancer.
True. Yeah, yes. Early game balance was all over the board. Druids were very underpowered.
Yeah.
Coming to the conclusion that classes like the Barbarian and the Druid lag behind significantly in terms of kill speed, unlike the other classes leveling.
Yeah.
The balance was so bad about the Druid that memes were being made, and the class was nothing but a laughingstock.
17 damage.
Yeah, that's why I was always in favor of ensuring that even at early game, all the classes are balanced equally, or at the very least, have some indicator when you're selecting a class that, will rate them difficulty-wise, or give something hey, this class is weak early game but becomes really strong late game, just because I think it's a bad player-first experience if you take a Druid and your buddy takes, like a Necromancer, and you're playing together, and you see your Necro buddy obliterating enemies, and you're struggling, and you're like, man, I'm really bad at this game. What bad choices did I make? And the bad choice you made was picking Druid.
Just picking Druid.
I don't think that's a good first player experience.
Definitely not. So that's a great point right there, and something I want to kind of expand upon. So obviously, everybody goes into Diablo 4. Well, the majority of players are going to go into Diablo 4 with an idea of what class they want to play. And unfortunately, a lot of times I find that typically melee classes or melee-oriented classes tend to suffer compared to those more ranged-based classes. And that's usually because, obviously they have to get closer to enemies before they can actually deal damage. Their mobility is usually quite terrible. And, specifically in Diablo, for some reason, they just feel like, those classes don't need any kind of resource regeneration. So with that being said, I wish they would kind of step back away from like where the classes were in previous Diablos and just give every class some form of resource regeneration in the early game. Some of the things that would make Druid or Barbarian way better at that point in time was if they just could generate resources without actually having to use their basic attack. And then another thing that I find that's really kind of unfortunate is a lot of people really enjoy specific classes like Rogue, because they have great mobility. And I feel like that's the cornerstone to creating a fun, exciting class, is to have that great mobility built into the class. And one of the ways I feel like they could probably do that is by giving you possibly giving you like a % increase to movement speed for every like 1 or 2 levels you obtain in the game. So that way, by the time you're in the end game and with a fully leveled character, that you're probably going to be sitting around, halfway to movement speed cap at that point in time. So the way I would say it is like if you had 100% movement speed and the cap is 200%, by the time you got to level 50 or level 100, that you'd be at 150% movement speed. And then you could gain that extra 50% through like, gear affixes or, some kind of aspect that would, increase your movement speed overall. So those are some ideas I've had, but definitely like, you definitely felt that kind of lack of damage, that punch that, that other classes might have had in the early game compared to, when you compare the druid or barbarian to like a necromancer or sorcerer. But obviously that changed when the game released.
Features such as the gem tab, skill loadouts, more bank storage, and story seemed good enough for now. After the open beta weekends, the official Diablo team releases the Into the Endgame developer update video, breaking down everything the game has to offer once you reach the end game. And developers made incredibly bold promises that were sadly never delivered upon.
Brand new activities that provide meaningful progression, no matter their playstyle.
There's going to never be an absence of something.
I'm trying to think. Brand new activities. I guess he's talking about the Nightmare Dungeons, right? They provide progression you can't get elsewhere. But that's one. Okay, Helltide technically was also a brand new activity. Well, okay, so I guess you can argue, well, Nightmare Dungeons aren't brand new activities because you're just redoing dungeons.
Yeah, it's just like Greater Rifts.
They're harder, but it's the same mechanics, right? You can argue it's the same mechanics, so calling it a brand new activity, sure, okay. I guess similarly with Helltide. No, well, Helltide, you are doing something new. You're collecting the things, right? Maybe what you're doing in Helltide is still just killing monsters and doing events, but you are picking up the cinders, right? That is a new activity, and you're getting progression, or at least at launch, you were getting progression in Helltide that you couldn't quite get elsewhere. Well, actually, no, it wasn't progression. No, it was items, right? So you get crafting materials. It's not that Helltide gives you any kind of progression that you can't get elsewhere. That really is just Nightmare Dungeons where you level up your glyphs.
There's going to never be an absence of
something. So I mean, with that being said, I feel like again, where we're at with gaming, it's kind of hard to create, and that's why I don't really like the way the developers kind of promise these new exciting activities. I can't blame them because they're trying to generate excitement for the game, and obviously they're trying to sell you that the game is going to be a good product on launch. But, where we're at with gaming, it's kind of hard to reinvent the wheel at this point in time, right? Without basically taking the game in a dramatically different direction than it would normally be from its previous iterations. So the Nightmare Dungeons, obviously, they are pretty much just like other, systems that have been in place in other Diablo games as well as other action RPGs out there. And then Helltide's, honestly, it's just some open world content that really you don't have a purpose for. That's my biggest problem, is that they created an open world for the game, and the open world really didn't need to be there. I feel like it's there. There's opportunity there, but Helltides is not it. Unless they do some dramatic changes to Helltides, because honestly, the only reason to go there is Forgotten Souls. There's other things you could do that get you far more XP or far more legendaries than doing Helltides. So maybe they could have spent a little bit more time on those different systems in the game and kind of added some depth there instead of, kind of like just tying Forgotten Souls to Helltides and forcing you to go there if you wanted to have those opportunities to basically re-roll or upgrade your gear. But, again, I just don't think that's something that's kind of unique to Diablo. I think that's something that you're going to see broadly across all action RPGs. I feel like they should focus more on implementation as opposed to trying to reinvent something. Just do it really well. Make Nightmare Dungeons really fun and exciting for players to play through. Make Helltides really fun and exciting for players to play through. Don't necessarily focus on creating this wildly different system that's been everywhere else, because you're really not... I'm not saying that it's not possible. I'm just saying it's not probable that you're going to be able to do that in any game, in any game that's going to be coming out in the near future.
Technically true. There's always something to do, it's true.
Yeah.
You might not want to do it, but there's always something to do.
Wars place where we're allowed to have
Which
a lot more depth,
obviously
a lot more
isn't the
customization,
best way to
many
go
more
about
options
it.
as you go. There's over 120 dungeons to play through and find in Diablo 4, and any one of them can become a nightmare dungeon.
We later found out that this was simply not true, being that there was only
Okay, yeah. In a season, it's a limited selection, yeah.
roughly 20 nightmare dungeons in a rotation
Which
at
isn't
the time,
bad.
forcing you to do the same ones over and over again. A few days later, the
Yeah, I kind of have mixed feelings about that. So, I had asked, when I was at Blizzard HQ and we did the live stream, I asked why, you know, just that selection, as opposed to letting every dungeon become a nightmare dungeon, and I believe the answer given was in order to have a rotation, or to keep things fresh, basically season to season. And I wasn't fully sold on the answer, but now that I see how the game is played, where it's like, well, here's a tier list of, among those 20, only run these 5 dungeons. Now it's like, okay, in that context, it makes sense. Rotate the dungeons, because if we always had all 120 dungeons available, then it's literally the same 5 dungeons every season forever. Whereas if you're rotating it, at least the top 5 within those selection will change. There might be better ways of addressing that, which would be rebalancing the dungeons, but the reality is, if you're not a meta chaser, yeah, like once you're in endgame, there's no reason to do dungeons other than nightmare dungeons, except maybe if you're doing a whisper. But yeah, for the most part, you're ignoring, you know, 100 dungeons and only running 20 of them every season.
Diablo.
Yeah, so that's a great point. The rebalancing of the nightmare dungeons. So, you know, I agree that there should be like a pool of dungeons you run per season, right? To keep it fresh, to keep the dungeons kind of cycling through. I think having these massive amount of dungeons, you know, to kind of pick from is fine, but, you know, you really kind of want to, I think it's a good idea to focus on those select few. However, like Rhykker just said, you know, there does need to be some significant rebalancing on these dungeons. There's too many dungeons that are just kind of, without lack of a better word to explain it, just quite boring. I mean, there's too much backtracking. There's too many issues you run across where, you know, they're just kind of an annoyance to run. You don't really want to do it. And not just that, but there are also a lot of the different, I guess, modifiers that you get on your nightmare dungeon sigils that are really frustrating to actually have. So anything that, you know, like for instance, Lightning Storm. Who likes Lightning Storm? You have to kind of constantly be followed by this little, you know, sigil floating above your head. And then when it, you know, keys off, you got to run inside the dome to protect you from a lightning strike. And it just slows you down. And, you know, that's not fun for anyone. We don't want to be slowed down. We want to feel that speed, fast, intense gameplay, you know, excitement, not, you know, have to find shelter inside the bubble every 2 seconds, you know. So maybe they can do that, rebalance some of the dungeons, make them a lot more accommodating to, you know, to the player experience, and then, you know, maybe take out some of those modifiers that are really kind of lackluster. I feel like, you know, they turn a fun dungeon into a slog. I feel like that's something they could probably do.
Diablo 14.
Kind of the inspiration.
We wanted
good.
to bring Diablo 4 artistically more back towards like Diablo 2.
Have we heard?
It's so I feel like they did even more towards Diablo 1. I wish that in addition to tone, they had also brought more strongly itemization back to Diablo 2. I feel that Diablo 2's itemization system, while not perfect, I think the framework of D2's itemization is fantastic. And I think every ARPG that has great itemization used Diablo 2's framework, and every ARPG that does not have great itemization did not use Diablo 2's framework.
Yeah,
so
pretty much.
I really wish that D4 had more strongly used D2's framework for itemization.
So that's a great point again. My first introduction to D2 was D2R, the re-release of Diablo 2. And I really did enjoy the itemization in D2R. And honestly, the unfortunate part is like, you know, like you just stated, you know, they brought the aesthetic, the overall tone from D2 back, but they didn't bring that itemization. And itemization is a big problem currently in Diablo 4. And hopefully they will remedy that later on. But one other thing I wanted to say here is that I think it's also a big problem that, and not because I don't feel like it, you know, some of the things weren't a good step in the right direction, but I think it's a big problem that Blizzard kind of tried to basically make 2 different communities, well, I would say 3 communities happy. You know, people looking for a new game, people who were tied to D3, and then people who were tied into D2. And really what happened is they brought in some good things from the other games they've made, but they left out some crucial aspects of those games that made those games so much fun for the players who played them. So inevitably what happened is once people kind of got past that surface level part of D4, you know, the first 50 to 70 levels of the game, and kind of the first, probably I would say the first half of the end game, they discovered that, you know, a lot of the systems that were implemented into D4 were rather shallow. You know, kind of like the old saying is, you know, vast is an ocean, but shallow is a puddle. So I'm hoping that they will improve on that with the new season coming up and future seasons as well.
Heard this story before? Is this something that Blizzard is doing once again to tug on our nostalgia? Is history going to repeat itself like it did?
I don't think it's about tugging on nostalgia. I think it's giving the people what they want. I mean, people are overwhelmingly wanting things to go in that direction.
Warcraft,
especially when they did D2R. Like even me, like when I played D2R, and I've played so many action RPGs, but just comparing Diablo games, when I played D3 and D2R, I felt like D2R was probably a much better in-game experience for me than D3. However, I really enjoyed the combat of D3. And also, I like the sets as well. I like incorporating the sets that they did in D3. But, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to do that. I just, you know, I think it's more about implementation. So you have to kind of, if you're going to add those things back, you got to nail it. And if you don't, man, are you going to pay for it?
Forged, Overwatch, and World of Warcraft Classic. The only thing left to do now is hope what they say is true and await launch day. Before you know it, the internet is absolutely slammed with Diablo 4 marketing. They also announced the Diablo 4 hardcore leveling competition, where the first 1,000 users to reach level 100 on hardcore will be...
Yeah, that was another thing that I wasn't really in favor of, given the unfairness of people having the head start, some people having had early access to the game, including the endgame testers from back in, you know, October or whenever it was, fall of 2022. Sure, changes might have been made, but they have more experience with the game than anyone else. I really thought that this should have happened for Season 1. It would have been the most fair to do it for Season 1, but of course, I mean, it doesn't align with having the major hype on launch. I understand from a marketing perspective doing it at launch, but I really think it would have been best to wait for Season 1.
Eligible to have their battle tag.
And it's not just that, you know, it's not just the people who got to play test the game as well, but it's also people who may be in that circle of people who, you know, kind of, when the information got kind of spread through the community, they were the first ones to get it. What was the best class? What was the best build for the class? What was, you know, what items were you kind of trying to get to incorporate on your different heroes to make them, you know, that much better? What was the best dungeon to farm? All of those different things. So, and again, I'm not a huge fan of the whole reach level 100 as an accomplishment, but if you're going to do it, you should have waited till everyone had an even playing field. And I mean, I think a lot of people really wanted that, to get that, be that first person to reach that level 100 and get that name on the statue for the hardcore 100. And you know, obviously we all know even that had its problems, where, you know, they had to basically do a revision or add more, you know, names to the list.
Engraved on a physical statue of Lilith on the Blizzard back on top, right? Well, that statement couldn't have been more untrue. Shortly after launch, the internet was flooded with reviews about Diablo 4. The early game, being relatively good from a gameplay perspective, quickly dissipated as people headed into the end game. Because the truth is, Diablo 4 had no innovation and nothing truly creative toward the ARPG genre. And Blizzard simply took no risks. Tree of Whispers are the same thing as bounties from Diablo 3. They kept the same generic gambling systems. Paragon boards are just stolen content from Path of Exile and Wolfkin. Nightmare dungeons are just riffs from Diablo.
Our Paragon boards, yeah, okay, sort of. Yeah, sort of like Wilson's skill tree. I do agree that overall, Diablo 4 is not very innovative. Like, I think everything in D4 you could probably have found somewhere in some other game. Now, a game doesn't need to be innovative in order to be a good game, as long as it's taking existing ideas and executing them at a superlative level. I do feel the biggest thing that D4 does is have this open world. It's not the first ARPG to have an open world, which is why I can't call it an innovation per se, but at least it is something that it's doing drastically different than most of the other ARPGs.
It's true.
That are popular these days. I always saw that as the singular differentiating factor of D4. Like, how is it being different, and it's this shared open world. That was the one thing that made it really different from what else is out there. Again, not the first ARPG to do an open world,
yeah,
but
not the first.
It's not common these days.
Now, I just want to say, like, I don't like when people say something is stolen from another game. Like, to me, that's such a bad faith thing. Every game draws inspiration from a previous game. Going through any genre of game, you're going to find so many systems in every game that are very similar to systems that have previously existed. So saying something is stolen from something else, I mean, you'd have to kind of backtrack to the very first game that ever, kind of put a system like that in place. And then that game would be the only one with that system ever, or else every other game had stolen it from that system. So I kind of don't like loaded language like that. It's almost kind of revealing a creator's own personal biases. And like Rhykker said here, and it's something I believe, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just have to continue to make a really good will here. And I do feel like Diablo, kind of let a lot of people down, including myself to some degree, when they created Diablo 4. And, as well as the innovation, yes, they did not innovate much, well, really anything at all. Now, I will say the game is in its infancy, and there is going, hopefully, Blizzard will take some risks here with this game, because honestly, it shouldn't be the indie studios taking the highest risks, right? They should be the ones who are kind of sitting back with their small budgets and being like, okay, guys, we just need to make a really good version of whatever is popular right now just to get our foot in the door. It should be these AAA companies going out there and just creating something insanely different than everything else, just in an attempt to kind of push the genres forward in a different direction or add something unique to the genres as a whole. But, again, people want to play it safe now. A lot of these games are so expensive to make. And honestly, when you get the finished product, you're like, why was it so expensive? I feel like I could get this game for not just much cheaper, but someone who's probably more passionate or probably a far better developer could have made this game for a fraction of the budget. And I don't think that really is unique to gaming. I think that's the entertainment industry as a whole, as it currently stands in today's kind of era of entertainment.
Boards are just stolen content from Path of Exile and Vulcan. Nightmare Dungeons are just riffs from Diablo 3. The new free choice leveling is the same thing as Diablo 3's adventure mode. Nothing here was brand new.
Yeah, so all those things like taken from D3, they're improved from D3, but
yeah, they are
like the easiest way to explain these systems to someone who played D3 is to just relate them to D3 systems.
Or innovative.
Agreed.
It was the same reused and recycled content, and fans were simply bored of it within a few weeks' time. The most common mistake we see from games with lack of endgame presence is they make the grind to max level longer, so it gives them time to come up with something new. And what did Blizzard do? Exactly just that. One by one, they were going across the board and nerfing dungeon farms to permit anyone from leveling too quickly from specific dungeons. And when that wasn't enough, they completely nerfed elite mob density across the board.
Alright, so on the topic of XP grind, I have an unpopular opinion here. I am totally fine with it taking rather long to reach 100, to reach max level. In Diablo 2 and in Path of Exile, where the level cap is 99, it is not an expectation that you reach max level. The vast majority of players never reach max level and are fine with that. They'll like hit level 90 plus a bit. It takes quite a bit of time to get there, and people generally don't complain or they don't criticize these games for it taking long to reach max level. And so I don't think it's a problem necessarily in D4 that it takes long to reach level 100. The game doesn't start at level 100, or at least it shouldn't. I think the reason that it might be problematic that it takes long to reach level 100 in D4 is due to other things, which he might be getting to. But them nerfing XP and how long it would take to reach 100 wasn't them like desperately trying to buy time. It's just that we have in mind that it would take X amount of time to reach 100. People have found ways to do it in a tenth of the time. Ergo, we need to do some rebalances. In my opinion, the problem is, and the reason why people complain about it taking so long, is a couple of factors. And probably the major contributor there is that after about level 70 is when we tend to see a lot of drop-off in players. And it's just because I feel the itemization system isn't interesting enough to keep people engaged. And while D4 did launch with more endgame content than any other ARPG has ever launched with, any other launched ARPG to this date has had less endgame content at its launch than D4 has had at its launch. There's still not enough to keep people engaged in the long term. Now that said, right, Diablo 2 had no endgame content, but Diablo 2 just had a really robust itemization system that even if you're just kind of doing the same thing over and over, the itemization system is just so interesting that the loot chase is all that you need to drive you.
Yeah,
and I feel that the itemization and the loot in D4 just isn't exciting enough for us to ignore the other things. So what happens is you reach level 70, and now everything has slowed down. It's taking long to reach level 100. It's effectively repeating the same activities over and over.
And you're not really
the most rewarding thing right now
upgrades.
is doing nightmare dungeons, so you're doing that over and over. And the loot system doesn't have a lot of very exciting moments or interesting moments with it. So now that the game has slowed down drastically, all of a sudden you're able to see the cracks in the different systems, and you don't have that like really robust itemization to make you able to ignore the fact that there isn't like a million different endgame activities and all these other things.
Yeah,
One of the most fun...
So I will disagree with him a little bit here, and it's really just personal preference. So for me, I do not see reaching level cap as this big achievement. In fact, I personally feel like they need to step away from that entirely. Another system that I feel like that might have been successful in Diablo 2 because it was ahead of its time. We're just in a different time now than we've ever been, and I think the focus is more or less going to be on in-game activities. And I don't feel like leveling to 100 is one of those things that needs to be a part of that. I do feel like there should be some grind, obviously, just to keep the player engaged with the leveling process. But it should be a relatively, decent, smooth experience from 1 to 100, and then eventually as the life cycle of the game continues, getting from 1 to 100 should be just almost like something you can do in a day. But I mean, I think that's probably closer to the half-life of the game. And then going on to something he said that I will agree with, Diablo 4 did kind of set a bar here. Maybe not exceedingly high, maybe just a little bit of a notch above, but they definitely have more in-game content than any other action RPG I've ever played. But like he said, the problem really isn't the fact that they have the in-game content, because I think that's a positive. It's the fact that every system implemented that kind of gets you there isn't really that exciting. So the itemization's not really that exciting. Once you hit level 75, level 80, you probably have all the gear you need. And as the current class balance sits, which I'm not necessarily happy with, once you get one or two of the broken aspects, or you're utilizing a skill that shouldn't be working the way it's currently working, you're just bulldozing through all the content. I mean, you're just bulldozing through all the dungeons. There's nothing that can really kill you unless you basically almost intentionally make a mistake and then you die, but then you just reload and jump right back into it. Even in hardcore, you have the extra life potion. Unless you just completely zone out or you disconnect, you're probably not going to die.
Aspects of the game. Instead of buffing the lackluster dungeons that were boring and slow, they nerfed the fun ones. They continue to do this with nearly everything in the game moving forward.
Yeah, I just
Build
don't feel like
diversity
they
was the
should
same
have nerfed
result.
any dungeons.
Across all classes, you can see a clear-cut pattern in people using the same exact builds over and over again. Instead of buffing weak abilities to bring them in line with the strong ones, they simply nerfed the abilities that were performing too well, making everything feel boring. And with the price of recost and the non-existent...
I know people feel different ways about this. I've always been a believer in nerfing, not just buffing, because I lived through Diablo 3. At the start of Diablo 3, the devs would buff and nerf things. If things were really strong and OP, they would bring down their power. And of course, no one enjoys taking medicine. Everyone is upset whenever nerfs happen. So after a couple of years of that, the remaining D3 devs were like, fine, you guys are always complaining about nerfs. We're not going to nerf things anymore. Only buffs from now on to underperforming stuff forever. Hooray. And what happens?
Yeah, that's a terrible idea.
Power creep, power creep, power creep, power creep. We have items today in Diablo 3 that give you 40,000% more damage, because that is what unfettered...
That is insanely bad. It should never be like that. There's no... I mean, this isn't... this isn't Dragon Ball Z, for the love of God. I'm just saying, like, you don't have to save the universe every time. It doesn't have to continually be this, like, huge jump in power, I feel like they really need to kind of bring it back. If I remember correctly, that's exactly what they said they were going to do, is kind of pull back the reins a little bit and try to make it a little bit different here. Try to create a decent balance in a game.
Buffing and never nerfing does. Feels great for a season, 2 seasons, 3 seasons. After 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, numbers are absolutely bonkers out of control. You gotta have nerfs
it's not
in addition to
healthy
buffs.
for a
But that's the
game.
key there, right? Nerfs and buffs. You look at the stuff that's way overperforming, you bring that down. You look at the stuff that's underperforming, you bring that up. It's always going to be an iterative process. Players are always going to find there's just a million different combinations of things in the game, and players trying to find ways to break it in different ways. That having perfect balance, especially at launch, is impossible. So it's about, okay, every time, every season, readjusting the numbers, readjusting. And it's okay if over time the average level of power rises slightly. Like Path of Exile has achieved a really good system whereby I think they allow for 15% power creep per season, is I think what they had said. So with compounding interest, I think that's like 2 years before you're dealing double damage, as opposed to like, 40,000% more damage.
That's why people
And I know everyone's
love
like,
PoE.
but it feels fun to be on this broken build that obliterates the hardest content in the game in 30 seconds. Yes, that feels great for 2 weeks. And then it's like, this game's too easy. There's nothing to do. I've defeated everything instantly. But again, nerfs are always going to be unpopular. It's to be expected. You can't expect people to ever feel good about getting nerfed. So generally, people will be more willing to accept that if they're otherwise having a good time, if there's otherwise good stuff to be happy about and to celebrate. But if it's just a whole lot of negativity across the board and then you're getting nerfs, yeah, yikes. I can understand that getting rolled into a whole host of other issues.
So just kind of expanding on that. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of buffs and nerfs, specifically nerfs. I think right now there are a lot of things that need to be nerfed, like for my druid class. Obviously, the bulwark builds are out of control. They're really, working, in my opinion, not as they're intended. And then you have the rampaging builds that are just, stacking crit damage like crazy and obliterating everything. And to me, that really, I guess what I would say is, it's not complex enough for it to be dealing that much damage, and obviously there's this massive gap between, how much damage those builds, or I should say that skill and that aspect can do versus everything else, almost rendering everything else kind of pointless, only really just helping the damage slightly, not really being a solid part of the damage being dealt. Now, like you said, you gotta when you nerf things, you replace it with something that's exciting. But you also have to keep in mind that when you do nerf things, you can't take away all the fun out of the things you do nerf. So people should still be able to have that as an option. And like always, you're never going to have perfect balance. There's always going to be 1 or 2 or 3 builds that outshine the rest, and maybe one build that's the best build of them all. But there really shouldn't be such a large discrepancy overall. And then just kind of expanding on that, with the way gaming has become so popular, and so many gaming websites and so many content creators have popped up over time, the dissemination of information has gotten so much faster, and now people are getting a hold of in-game builds that will obliterate everything within the first week of playing the game. I mean, people are playing this, games as a job now, so people are able to kind of give out information much faster, and obviously there's an incentive to be the first person to find out that super good build that's killing everything, because then you're going to get the views, you're going to get the clicks, you're going to get the subscribers, you're going to get the followers, right? So with that being said, it does, it's almost like you're buying a Game Shark, right? For Super Nintendo, you're buying a cheat, you're putting in a cheat code. You're getting past all of the things in the game that you wouldn't, organically you would have, discovered on your own. But now someone's kind of spoon feeding you the information, and you've cut the lifespan of the game, in half or more. So that really is a big problem. I don't think it's necessarily, I shouldn't say a problem. I just think it's something that gaming now has to figure out. Developers now have to figure out a way to work around that so they can launch a game with enough systems in place and with enough depth to those systems that players are getting a better gaming experience. And, like he said, PoE has a great way of increasing power creep. And, like I said, I feel like Diablo 4 set a bar for overall in-game content. I think PoE 2 is going to just catapult that bar even higher. And, you know, I have my opinions on that as well, and I can't wait to play that game, but we're focusing here on D4, and I'm currently enjoying this game. So.
Distance of skill loadouts or a dual specialization system in play, it was too risky to constantly be testing out and theory crafting new builds. It was too tedious.
That's another point as well. So anytime they do a balance change, they should give us a free respec.
I mean, that should be standard.
This is very fair.
Across the board.
You build a game where you don't have free respec, where you're expected to stay on the same build and keep empowering your character, and then you're like nerfing things, and now the player is on a build that doesn't work anymore, and now they have to spend potentially millions of gold to respec to try to have a better build. I would prefer that if you nerf something, you give people a free respec. It's not the player's fault. Why are they being punished for this?
Is to respec.
I mean, honestly, in my opinion, and I know this might go against what a lot of other people think, but why even just charge people for a respec at this point? Just let people respec their builds. This isn't a competitive. I mean, this isn't some kind of competitive game. You know, this isn't. I just don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's necessary to have a gold sink where that's implemented into respecking. Just let players experiment, theorycraft, create all kinds of different things as much as they want, and implement those systems in a different way somewhere else in the game. But just let players respec. Just let them do it. I think it would be fun. I think it wouldn't really, you know, I think you could only get positive feedback if you just let players respec for free. All the time, whenever they want, however they want. The gear is really, honestly, the focus should be on bossing, should be on PvP, should be on time trial events, and should be on that end game. It shouldn't be on, you know, oh, let me just make you have to grind out gold to respec your character. That should not be where the focus is at, in my opinion.
Hundreds of Paragon points manually, one by one, and flat out too
Yeah, they
expensive.
need to change that.
Having to grind out countless legendary aspects, uniques, and perfect affix rolls on every piece of gear was something that took too much time.
Yeah.
By this time, players were...
So just talk about that real quick. I feel like there's too many things on a percentage sliding scale. Like, I feel like they could have just, instead of the aspect system, just take out that system altogether and give us something like the cube system in D3, where once you get a legendary, you basically just take it to the cube and you deconstruct it and you have it forever at the maximum percentage. You know, it's already hard enough to get the best in-game gear, right? Especially now that they've made some changes as to how you roll your gear with recent patches. Let that be the focus of grinding. I mean, honestly, like the aspects, plus, you know, if you just take those out, put them in a cube, bam, you free up tons of inventory space. So I think that's a big deal. I think they should definitely change that. If you want to bring in a system from a previous Diablo game, that's a perfect one to bring in. That's a perfect one everyone loves. So, yeah, take out the aspect system. Just give them a flat increase. Stop giving us these constant, you know, unnecessary, you know, high-low scales for your percentages. Just give us the legendary and let us play a build, you know. Let's play the game.
We're reaching level 65 plus, and the level pacing drastically slowed down, and so did the excitement of good loot rewards as well.
So the problem with Diablo 4 is that after you spend about 80 hours into the game, all of the gear upgrades that you can get are so minimal, there's nothing else to do.
So the time it took to level vastly increased, and the rewards and purpose for leveling became so much smaller. It's very obvious to everybody now that Diablo 4 has no endgame, and
yeah, you got a couple characters to 70 plus. That's really all the game has to offer right now. In case I've not made myself clear. So I think the campaign is really fun. I think it's the most robust campaign we've ever seen, possibly in any Blizzard game. Best story. I think it's really fun to get all the way up to level 50, even all the way up to level 70. It's once you're past 70, the further you get past 70, the more bored you get. But for me, that journey up to that point is really enjoyable. But yeah, as of right now, beyond level 70, I lose motivation.
It was heavily...
And again, I agree there. You know, I feel like the campaign all the way up until, for me, it probably goes from 70 to 80. I'm having a great time. I'm enjoying the content that's there. I feel like to say there's no in-game is, again, just missing the overall problem with the game. I feel like Diablo 4 definitely has a decent amount of in-game content as a base action RPG for what it is on launch. You know, it could definitely be better, and I think that we should expect more from a AAA company like Blizzard to give us a more, you know, to give us those, you know, really good systems that have a lot of depth. But to say that there's no in-game is disingenuous, and honestly, it's just, again, I think another, telltale of like the bias of a content creator, or just not necessarily the bias, but a person understanding what people want to hear and what will get the most views.
Front-loaded. The minor endgame testing, mixed with the constant changing of development teams and major lack of inexperience and workplace professionalism, was finally starting to take its toll. It became too difficult to manage storage inside of a full loot ARPG game. Between gems, legendaries, and aspects, rare items...
So, one issue that I have, I think... okay. I still have fun with the core gameplay post-level 70. Like, just going around killing monsters on my rogue, like, I still love the playstyle. But what becomes tedious for me is the loot and inventory management. It's that I'm going, like, I almost begrudge the loot system.
Yeah.
We have very limited stash space. We have this entire itemization system that's designed around having rare items that you upgrade with legendary aspects. So I have to look at every single legendary drop to see if it has an aspect that I need, right? I can't ignore any. I have to check to see if it has that legendary aspect.
Yep.
So I'm holding on to that, then I'm extracting good aspects, and I only have a limited stash space of aspects. So then if I have too many aspects, then I have to be like, okay, which are my worst aspects? I'm going to get rid of those, replace them with my best aspects. Then just gear-wise, okay, for every itemization slot, I have to pick up items, unless I ever get to a point where I'm like, okay, this is my best in slot. I no longer have to look at boots, because I got my unique boots. Thank goodness. That's like the best feeling. That's the best, literally the best feeling, when I don't have to pick up any more boots. The best feeling isn't that I got my item, it's that I don't have to look at boots anymore. But yeah, so I have to pick up and look at every rare item.
Every single one.
And then with all these myriad of affixes, I have to like cross-reference, okay, do I need this stat here? And then it's like, okay, wait, now on this item, which of my aspects can I put? How can I juggle around my aspects? So it feels tedious to have to like cross-reference between the items that I have and the items that I'm picking up and the aspects. And that's all just for one build. I've given up holding gear for multiple characters or multiple builds. And I'm someone who normally, in every game, like, I want to have a bunch of alts. I just want to have one of every character, and it's just not feasible. It's just not possible. I did make one of every character, but I basically would just, okay, I'm done with this character. I'm going to get rid of all their stuff in the stash to make room for stuff for my other character now.
So, again, going back to what we were just saying there, just take the aspect system out, for crying out loud. Just remove it. Put it in a queue. Put it in a vendor. Make it something that we can just run into, go into the interface, select the aspect, put it on a piece of gear, and go play the game. There's no reason to put that as another thing for us to tediously go through every single 2 seconds. For example, one of my druids that I was making through the recent season 1, I'm trying to make a werewolf, were-NATO kind of hybrid build, right? And I didn't get I think it's called Storm Chaser, where your tornadoes seek out a target. I did not get one of those aspects, not one of those aspects, until like level 63 or 64. And, that's just mind-boggling. Like, why is that a thing? And then you also have that, again, you have that variance, will it do one, will it chase one enemy? Will it chase 2? Will it chase 3? It's like, guys, come on. Free up the stash space. If you can't give us more stash space right away, implement systems that free up the stash space we currently have. Remove the aspects, or not remove them, but give us an option to put them in something that we can go to and just pick those aspects up as we need them. Instead of, farming up multiple legendaries, we just kind of, I got the one I needed. I deconstruct it in the vendor. The vendor has that forever now, and I can just kind of go and pick it up as I need it on new gear pieces. It would really it's such a quality of life improvement that would change the whole way the game works and how it feels overall in terms of itemization. And then again, free up that stash space for players who really enjoy picking up a lot of items. Now, me, it doesn't really affect me. I'm a minimalist. I don't really mind refarming stuff for a new build. I think that's honestly part of the fun of playing a new build. But it definitely doesn't hurt to kind of free up that stash space for players and give people, especially people who love alts, because your account is tied. All of your alts are tied to your main account, so you don't really get more stash space just by creating another player, another character. So definitely need to do something about that. And then, you know, again, having to look at every rare, I think it was a good idea at first, but it's one of those things that's a good idea on paper, but in practice, boy, it's kind of annoying. And I feel like they could have solved that problem a little bit if the uniques were actually pretty decent that dropped, like almost like Primal Gear in D3. Like if the uniques dropped with like max stats on the affixes they have, that would be really good. Also, if the uniques actually had good affixes, and then also if you could maybe possibly re-roll one affix on a unique, something you guys need to implement, because a lot of these uniques are really cool, but ain't nobody going to use them because the affixes are terrible. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Hopefully they'll do something about that.
Uniques, inventory was quickly flooded within minutes of grinding out a single dungeon, and players demanded more room for their other characters.
Yeah.
When Blizzard finally responded over a month later, they stated they couldn't add more because it creates a lot of memory overhead. When you see another player in game, you load them and their entire stash filled with all of their items. Things like a gem tab, leaderboard, stat.
Now I did want to talk about there for a second. I'm not a game developer, right? So I don't necessarily know if that's something that is common. However, what I will do here, and it's not necessarily just to kind of make an excuse for the developers there, but I don't know, say that's not common. Say it's something that isn't really, you know, something that's ever really implemented in other games. I don't know why they did that. Maybe they wanted to make it where you could have access to all your stash and the items in your inventory for when they implement a trade system. So when you're out in, you know, say you come across somebody and you both have an item you want to trade, well, instead of having to go back to town to pick it up out of your stash, or both of you having to go back to town and take yourself out of the action, maybe you could just bang, make a trade there. You have access to your entire stash space right there, wherever you're at on the spot, and you guys can trade back and forth freely without having to take yourself out of playing the game. So that's personally what I think might have been the reasoning for this whole kind of coding issue, but they never really gave us a solid answer. Now, maybe that's because that's not the reason, or maybe that's because they're trying to save it as a surprise. I have no idea, but I definitely know that you should never post something like that out on Twitter to a community of people who are already quite angry at you, because boy, will they make you look foolish. They will spend all day long on the internet typing the same thing over and over and over again. And then obviously people are going to make videos, and that is going to be a highlight of their video. So don't be on anyone's knockout reel. You know what I'm saying? Try to avoid that.
Hash tabs, loot filters, ability loadouts, all announced to be added in future expansions, sometimes as far as 6 months to a year from now.
Yeah,
only half
crazy.
of your renown carried over, and half of the brand new content and class changes in Season 1 was locked to the seasonal realms and was forbidden on the eternal realms. Meaning,
I think that's fine. This is not an appeal to tradition. This is how it's done in ARPGs. I'm not saying just because it's done this way, this is how it should be done, but it's done this way and it works and people like it this way. That when there's a new season, that there's some kind of new seasonal mechanic. Path of Exile does it, it's very successful in Path of Exile. D3 does it, it's very successful in D3.
It's all about implementation.
This is how we do it in modern ARPGs. It was developed for modern ARPGs and it works in modern ARPGs. So I think it's totally fine for the seasonal content to be in the season. There's a lot of good reasons for that. I have a whole video where I go over those reasons. I know still some people would like the content on non-seasonal, and that is totally fine to want that. I just don't think it's a fair criticism when this is how every other game is doing it and they're not getting criticized for it.
that if you wanted all
And that's true. And I feel like that's a lot of criticism that's being levied at D4 is, you know, there's so much criticism that they're putting in these videos now. You know, I know they're doing it just because you get a ton of views every time you make a Diablo bad or Blizzard terrible video. And I can't blame them, man. You get views, you get followers, you get tons of money from that. Hey, I'm all about that grind. You do you, brother. But at the end of the day, like, these are not fair criticisms. These things are implemented in a ton of other action RPGs. And even me personally, I'm not a huge fan of seasons. I don't like the idea that you have to reset. I prefer that continual progress of a character. You know, I like that MMO light style of gameplay. However, when I play an action RPG, I know what I'm getting myself into, and that's fine with me. I don't necessarily mind it so much that it stops me from enjoying the game. And yeah, I mean, you gotta create something in the season for players to actually want to come back and engage with. And then another point he made here with the renown thing. Yes, it was a huge issue, But I will give Blizzard credit here. It seems like they're listening to the community, and in Season 2, no more Renown. And, you know, honestly, I really enjoy the Renown system. I don't think it's a bad system. It's just poorly implemented. Instead of having a system where you constantly reset it, which is absolutely terrible, and it makes people not want to engage in a lot of the content you created, like, say, for instance, all the side quests, because you don't want to do them over and over and over again, which is understandable. And I like side quests. So, you know, instead of it doing it like that, they should have focused on building on the Renown system. So every season, they need to add a higher Renown cap and give us new activities, fun activities, engaging activities to do to increase that cap. You know, and maybe give us more skill points to allocate or more Paragon points to allocate as a reward, or cool cosmetics, a cool horse, a cool, you know, cosmetic for the horse, a cool emote, a cool title, anything. Just expand on it. Don't make us redo it. So we're not going to have to redo it anymore. And hopefully they will expand on it and make it a better, more in-depth system to engage with. Because I think it has potential for the longevity of the game.
All of these brand new changes and updates, you had to start all over and create a whole new character. You were then forced to go on to seasonal realms, and players were quickly flooded with additional monetization. By this point, players were at their limit. Metacritic scores plummeted, and the population slowly dwindled down to nothing within a week of Season 1 being launched. And with the final nail in the coffin, Larian Studios released Baldur's Gate 3 on August 3rd of 2023. Easily being the frontrunner for the game of the year, it knocked Diablo 4 out. The game had longer replayability, no egregious monetization, good developers, better RPG aspects, innovative design with stable servers and a real character creator, and gameplay sections with freedom of choice throughout your entire playthrough. Most of these things Blizzard used to take pride in, but those days are now over. A game that just a few...
So to clarify here, Baldur's Gate 3, phenomenal game. The implication is not that people stop playing D4 to play Baldur's Gate 3. Baldur's Gate 3 did not kill D4. Baldur's Gate 3 is just a phenomenal game. It's not like D4 would be doing amazingly now if Baldur's Gate 3 hadn't released.
Months ago, had a pop...
And moreover, Diablo 4 basically, you know, it did damage to itself. It had nothing to do with Baldur's Gate 3. However, I will say, if you really want to talk about Baldur's Gate, it was a hit to the entire gaming industry. It was a basic, like, slap to them and say, hey guys, wake up. This is what gamers want. It wasn't just a Diablo 4. Now, did Diablo 4, because it was the hot topic, and it still currently is the hot topic, not for a good reason, but did Diablo 4 face a lot of the criticism from the fact that Baldur's Gate was what it was? Yeah, it did, but it was more of a hit to the entire gaming industry. It's like a wake-up call. It's like, hey guys, we enjoy getting a complete game on release. We enjoy not having to basically pay, you know, $60, $70 every, you know, 4 months for your silly expansion that barely expands upon the game. But, you know, hopefully games like that continue to get made and they continue to be successful. And, you know, these big giant companies stop torpedoing their, you know, they stop torpedoing their reputation by cranking out, you know, soulless games. And they start actually utilizing the money that they do have to make phenomenal, engaging games that will sell really well, because they will, and you don't have to sacrifice, you know, the actual, you know, the actual reputation of your company. Because that's really all that's happening here with Blizzard, is that you have people in charge that are, you know, they're making tons of money, but only because they would have organically made that money. Like, many people would have bought Diablo 4. Diablo 3 wasn't well received, and honestly wasn't topping the charts throughout the entire life cycle of the game. And yet Diablo 4 still sold massively. You know, a lot of their other games, like you know, Warcraft Reforged, or you know, when they did Overwatch 2, they had a ton of bad press from those games, but somehow Diablo 4 still sold insanely well. You don't have to sacrifice quality to sell a game. In fact, what I will say is, because these AAA companies are not releasing games that are complete, that are fun, that have deep systems in place on launch, that are friendly to a player's pocketbook, because they're doing that and they're just basically farming out the most popular IPs until they're dead in the ground, you're going to send that company into an early grave. That company will not exist. That will not exist as long as it should if you had just respected the player base. Just respect the people who put money in your pocket. Like, that's all you have to do. When I go to work and I make my money at work, because I do have a full-time job and I do support a family, I'd like to trade that money gleefully over to you for a really great game. And you don't have to lie to me. You really don't. Like, I'll buy the game. Just make it good. And you know what? The longevity of your company, the profits of your company will never take a hit. You'll never have less profit in better quality. Okay, just not going to exist. Okay, because what's going to happen here with Diablo 4 is that, sure, you sold a lot of the game, the copies of the game at launch, and yeah, it's a success. But guess what? People won't come back to it. People won't come back for season 1, season 2, season 3, season 4, etc. And you might not think that's a big deal now, but when you guys go to release that new IP that you might have cooked up in the basement somewhere, they're not going to buy that. They're not going to buy it. They're just going to sit back and wait for some other company who's kind of that shining beacon on the rock, and they're going to buy their games. So just be aware of that. Like, just be aware. You don't have to sacrifice quality and increase your profits. In fact, every time you guys make a profit, the quality should go up and your profits will go up. And your company will have a great reputation, and people will come back to you every single time when you release another game, because they can trust that when they buy that game, when they buy that really expensive game, when they're working hard, multiple hours out of a day just to purchase that game that you created, they know they're going to get a quality product. They know they're going to have a great time, and they know they're going to form memories with their friends and their family that are going to last forever. And that's what you guys should really be thinking about. That's where the true money is at, giving people what they really enjoy. Okay, that's where you're going to make the money.
Population of almost 7 million concurrent active players at once has now lost more than 99% of its total population and is shrinking.
That's not so. Again, that's not. He's making up a statistic there. There's no basis for that number.
Yeah, it's just
I'm not disagreeing with the conclusion that the player numbers have dropped catastrophically, but it's exceptionally misleading to give an actual number on player counts. You can say viewership has dropped 99.6%. That is fair. Again, assuming that's where that number is, but there's no way we have actual player numbers. No way Blizzard would give us the player numbers on how bad D4 is doing. They just don't give player numbers, period.
More and more by the day. So what was the exact cause of Diablo 4's failure? Was it the constant change in development teams before launch day?
That certainly did not help, right? I mean, it is normal over the course of a game that is being developed for 5-10 years that there will be turnover, right? You can't expect every employee to stick with a company for 5 to 10 years. That said, again, the top 2 people were exited from the company late into development, but not towards the very end. So with a good 2 years left to go. So I'm sure any game would be negatively impacted by that. It is true that there seems to have been a higher rate of turnover within Blizzard during those tumultuous times, which again, I'm sure did not help. This is also during the lockdowns as well. A whole host of things contributing there did not help. And again, a fact that a lot of the senior Blizzard employees, veterans within the team, within the company, left as well. That's not to say that the new people are not talented or that they're not capable, but they're different people. You can't expect even Van Gogh to paint a Rembrandt. It's just not going to come out the same.
The loss of key figures within the company.
And I like that he provides context there to a lot of things that are, being said in this video. And yeah, with everything, there's going to be a lot of turnover. And obviously, if you could, if Blizzard focused more on making their employees happier in terms of their overall pay and working conditions, you probably wouldn't see that turnover. And, the pandemic did have an effect. A lot of people were working from home. Productivity probably seen a little bit of a hit. But a lot of these jobs you could probably do from home. But I definitely know that when you're trying to, get people on the same page, it's a lot harder to do when they're not physically at the job, at least to some degree. But it's still not, in my opinion, for a company like this, it's not an excuse, especially when even like you said, those developers, those top tier guys were probably left out about 2 years before the game launched, those 2 years are probably the busiest part of the development cycle. So they left when the busiest part of the development cycle was taking place, and it definitely had an impact on the game. To what degree, we'll never really know. It's not like they're going to come out with a tell-all and give us the full explanation. Not that they should have to, but you know, there is some. They do get a little bit of leeway here, but not very much, and I don't think it's a significant excuse to make. It's just definitely providing some context. They definitely could have done much better than what they did.
Company due to the allegations and walkouts, developers disliking the game they're creating, and the increased malice between leaders and company team members.
I highly believe that the majority of Blizzard employees probably have a negative opinion of Bobby Kotick.
Yeah.
Which is why I think the Microsoft acquisition, which is going through, seems like it should be a really good thing for the company.
It should be.
Was it the constant delays, the microtransactions?
Yeah, hopefully that acquisition will really change.
I think in the grand scheme of things, the cosmetic shop is like the least of D4's problems.
I like the cosmetic shop to some degree.
They're not forced. Like, at least there was no pay to win, right? Everyone, or you know, a lot of things like, oh yeah, you can't trust Blizzard, they're going to add pay to win. At least there was no pay to win, right? You can say the cosmetics are expensive, sure, but pricey optional cosmetics is not the reason people have stopped playing D4.
Yeah, I really can't stand the idea that you're forcing people to do anything. You're forcing players to buy this, or you're tricking players into doing this. You're tricking people. I'm a real big self-accountability person, okay? You choose what you choose. If you're an adult, you choose what you choose. I definitely give a different... I have a different opinion when it comes to young kids up to the age of, you know, up to a certain age. But when you're an adult, you choose what you choose. No one's, you know, putting a gun to your head telling you gotta buy this, okay? If you can't control yourself, that's your problem. You need to work on that. But yeah, I don't mind the cosmetics. The only time I kind of do get a little frustrated is that some of these cosmetics are legitimately cool, and it would be better if they tied them to achievements in the game. Like, they are awesome cosmetics, and it would be nice to get something really cool for your character that's tied to an achievement in the game. Killing a boss, completing a dungeon in a specific amount of time, doing something really cool. You know, that should be where you should get the best cosmetics, but I'm just an old soul in terms of gaming. That's where I came from. Unfortunately, we're not there anymore, and I honestly don't know if we'll ever be back there again. But I can always hold out hope. I'm an optimist, so I'm going to hope one day that we'll be back there again.
Completely lost its touch, and the era of this once King of Kings is now over. Is for sure. No game in history has had almost 7 million concurrent active players at one time, and within a couple months, get reduced down to less than 40,000 active players throughout the entire...
What are the sources on this?
...day.
Something I will say about that too, okay? Like I said previously, gaming is at an all-time high in terms of where it sits for entertainment, okay? This is brand new for now, but let me tell you something. When PoE 2 launches, it is going to be massive. It is, I almost can guarantee, and I'm going to go back to this video if I'm right, I can almost guarantee you that the numbers that Diablo 4 has seen, you're going to see numbers even higher in PoE 2 when it launches. And that's not just because PoE has such a good reputation as a company, and in my opinion, the head guy of that company is in love with his game, which I think that's phenomenal. That's what you should hope for when you have people like that in positions of power, that they really appreciate what they're making. But I think it's also the amount of players that Diablo 4 has brought, new players into action RPGs. I know that a lot of people are talking a lot of crap about Diablo 4 right now, but let me tell you something. I guarantee you there has been a massive amount of new players coming into games like PoE. And those players are going to be around for PoE 2, especially with the amount of influencers that are hyping PoE and PoE 2. There's going to be massive hype into the launch of PoE 2. Much deserved, of course, and I'm going to be playing it, and I know, I think that there's going to be insane numbers for PoE 2, and I think it's going to easily move past Diablo 4, and I think you're going to continue to see that same trend across the gaming industry as new games are popping up that are created by companies that are appreciated by the consumers. So I do expect games to definitely reach all-time highs, viewership to reach all-time highs. I don't believe that we have come anywhere close to seeing the level of popularity that gaming can reach to the masses. So I think we're still pretty much right there at the beginning.
Where is he pulling these numbers? Altogether, this video has been phenomenal. Production value is amazing.
Yeah.
Really well constructed video. This is why I'm being so nitpicky on certain things, because it could have been a perfect video. I don't like throwing around statistics with no backing, right? Anytime you put out a number, source. And the reason there's no source is because there is no source. This is not a real statistic. He's pulling some number that is not actually player counts. And it's a shame because it's distracting and it's taking away from an otherwise really solid argument. And again, I keep stressing this because I know people are going to be like, well, the Rhykker, obviously all the players are dead. Yeah, we're not questioning the conclusion. I agree the numbers are down dramatically. It's like if you say that Jupiter has the most moons in the solar system because it's the biggest planet with the most gravity, and I say, well, that's not true. And you're like, what? It doesn't have the most moons? And I'm like, well, it does have the most moons, just not necessarily for the reason you stated.
A 99...
So yeah, obviously, you know, he's being very generous in my opinion here. I think we understand where these I mean, every time they put out a Diablo 4 video recently in the recent past, it's always been a negative video, and those videos generate a ton of views. And yeah, I mean, the creator of this video is clearly, you know, making a lot of assumptions, and also bringing up statistics making statistics up out of thin air, as well as kind of, you know, being very picky in terms of criticism towards Diablo 4, that they could obviously, you know, that you could obviously paint a broad stroke across most of action RPGs as a whole. And like he said, it's a well-created, well-edited video, you know, but I don't think it adds anything to the discussion. I think it's really just another one of these videos that are made because, you know, it's going to get a lot of views. And I think, you know, with the amount of players, I shouldn't say players, with the amount of people that Diablo 4 created a massive jump in followers and subscribers for, it really made a lot of careers here on YouTube as well as on Twitch. I think those players are, those people are kind of at like a point like, where do I go from here? I thought this game was going to be the game. It put me on. But now it's like I have to jump off you know, it's like jumping off of a rocket ship right when it reached the atmosphere. You know, it's like, what do I do? Where do I go from here? So the only real, you know, reasonable place they can think of currently, while they get other things kind of going, moving along with their platform, is, you know, why not jump onto the bandwagon of I hate Diablo 4 and Blizzard is terrible? Because it does great numbers. I can't blame them. I personally won't do it. I'm a small creator. Who cares about what I say, right? But, you know, I just don't think I find that something I want to do. I personally like the style of Rhyker's video here. That's why I had to make a reaction video to it, because I enjoy the video so much. I like even-handed criticism across the board. I like level-headedness, and I like people who are really kind of providing context to things instead of just looking at them and saying, "Oh, this is terrible," because you're never going to solve a problem that way. You know, you have to approach it differently than that. But again, I don't blame him. I don't blame him.
This is why Diablo 4 is the biggest disappointment in recent gaming history. Hopefully, heading into 2024, they can bring...
And you see there, biggest disappointment in gaming history, and then he said, biggest disappointment in recent gaming history. Okay, big difference there. Recent, big difference there. Big difference.
Loads of improvements into the game and maybe flip the script on this whole situation. Maybe, just maybe, we can have a solid ARPG to play. But just remember, the new Path of Exile is on its way, and it could very well be too late. Have you played Diablo 4? What are your thoughts and feelings? What do you think is the biggest mistake they made? Let me know in the comment section below.
Yeah, all right. So overall, I think a very well-researched video, brought up a lot of good past and history of things that have happened. Again, couple places where I feel like he's kind of throwing numbers out there just with having a specific agenda. But overall, I don't think he too grossly misrepresents anything. All indications, as far as we can see from the outside, is that numbers are down substantially. I'll just add on top of what has been said here, maybe along the lines of what was the biggest mistake they made. One bit of frustration that I get with D4 is that I feel that there are lessons that were learned in Diablo 3 And those lessons are not carried over into Diablo 4. And it makes you wonder, why? Was it because they didn't have the time to do it? You know, simple things like the Mystic re-rolling things, right? Like, we had a functional system in D3, and then there's sort of a step back in D4. And there's little things like this, or sometimes even bigger things, in different areas where it's like, you guys already learned this. Like, we went through this lesson. Why do we have to do this again now? Sometimes it's about things where it's like trying to reinvent the wheel rather than just using something that worked. Again, like the baseline itemization of Diablo 2, which, again, you know, PoE, Last Epoch, a lot of other ARPGs with robust itemization, right? The core is D2's itemization. It's evolved, it's expanded. Last Epoch and PoE both evolve off that in different directions. And both in the case of Diablo 3 and Diablo 4, which I believe have weaker itemizations compared to these other games, there was this attempt at reinventing the core itemization of the ARPG.
And again, fully agree there. Sometimes there's no, it's not that there isn't improvement that can be made. It's that you might not be the person who's going to discover that improvement, okay? There's nothing wrong with recreating something that was phenomenal in the past, okay? It's okay. Not every system that you implement do you have to like dramatically revamp and recreate for the masses. That's not what we want. A lot of the most popular games in recent history, you know, they didn't really add anything that significant to the overall framework of how that genre of game is created. They more or less just took the systems that worked and fine-tuned them and made them perfection, or as close to perfection as you can get, because obviously perfection's not realistic. But yeah, you know, you don't have to recreate anything. Maybe you just implement systems that are very successful and you do them really well. And maybe instead of creating something new, you just give people more options, more choices, more things to do in a bigger, more vast, more I guess in-depth world to explore. You know, you don't have to recreate anything. You don't necessarily have to innovate anything for the base game, I would say. Now, because action RPGs run in seasons, you could do a ton of, you know, experimentation, you know, before you release a season and after you release a season. I don't think there should be, you know, as long as the core gameplay is incredibly fun and engaging for the player base, they're going to be very forgiving when you implement a new system, especially if it's something that's never been done before. They're going to welcome it with open arms. They're going to test it. They're going to tell you this isn't good or this isn't, you know, this is great. And they're going to really, you know, kind of do their best to help you basically, you know, create something new and innovative, because every player wants to be a part of that. That's like every player's dream, that they were there for the first of something and they actually helped implement that system, or they actually, you know, discovered a bug or did something cool. I think that really creates a lot of great memories for players. But that's really my take on the whole video. I really enjoyed this Rhykkers Reacts. Big inspiration for me. I really love the context he provided throughout the entire video. Like I said in the beginning of this video, guys, if you have not watched this video, which I highly doubt that if you're on my small channel, but if by chance you haven't seen this video, please go and watch the video. Give the man a thumbs up. Obviously, subscribe to his channel. He is a phenomenal content creator, and I really care. I always look forward to his videos. But like I said, that's it for the video, guys. That's my take on the whole situation. Those are some of my ideas. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. You know, go ahead and give whatever, you know, whatever ideas you might have, as well as any constructive or any real criticism at all. I don't care. I'm open to anything. So with that being said, you guys have a great rest of the day or night, wherever you're from, and peace out. See you in the next one, guys.